Have you ever tried to get a 5-year-old to sit still and talk into a microphone without touching it? Let's just say it was an adventure getting my daughter Clara to do this interview with me. But just so you're aware, she is the one that desperately wanted to be like her brother and have her own episode where she got to talk about her favorite podcasts. I'm Andy Smiley, the Friendly Podcast Guide. I'm a mom who uses podcasts to fight the boredom and loneliness of motherhood and to entertain my kids when I need a break. And I want you to be able to use podcasts in these ways too. But it can be overwhelming to try and find a podcast you or your kids will enjoy in the thousands of shows that are out there. That's where I come in. Each week, I talk about different podcasts with topics ranging from parenting to pop culture and everything in between. My episodes are short and they answer your questions about the show, so you'll know if it's a good fit for you or your kids or not. Now, let's talk podcasts. Shortly after I started making my podcast 2 years ago, Clara started carrying around a notebook and pencil and telling everyone she was working on her podcast. She had watched me take notes and make lists for my podcast. In all of my notebooks, I usually have at least 2 within grabbing distance at all times. And of course, she wanted to be like Mom and have her own podcast. I'm so excited that she is finally making her debut on my podcast to give her practice for when she starts her own podcast, most likely much earlier than when I started mine. I'm sure you're going to fall in love with Clara and all of her fabulous podcast recommendations as soon as you hear from her. But first, let me tell you about my guide to kid podcasts. Clara only shares a couple of kid podcasts in today's episode, so if you're looking for some more options, I have a resource for you. I use kid podcasts all the time as a mom, and you can too. You can use them when you're running errands with the kiddos to keep them from complaining the whole time, or when you need a mom break, you can just grab an easy activity like coloring pages or magnet tiles, turn on a kid podcast, and your kids will be entertained for at least half an hour. And that's only the tip of the iceberg of ways you can use kid podcasts. And to help you figure out which one is best for your kids, I made a guide to kid podcasts. There are 8 categories ranging from science to mindfulness to audio drama, with at least 3 podcasts in each category. There are 28 podcasts in total on the guide. I've listened to each of the podcasts so I can attest to them being kid-friendly. And I put my email at the bottom of the guide so that if you try a couple with your kids and none of them are a good fit, you can email me and I will personally help you find a kid podcast that works for your littles and you. You can grab this guide at the link in the show notes. Now you get to hear my conversation with Clara as she excitedly tells us about 3 of her favorite podcasts. Clara, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I'm excited to talk about your favorite podcasts. Are you excited?
Yeah.
Before we dive into your favorite shows, do you remember the first kid podcast you listened to?
Yes. Snoop and Sniffy.
Oh, Snoop and Sniffy. That's a good one. I love that one.
Yeah, I know.
My other question for you is, what is the most recent podcast that you listened to?
Miles the Brave.
That's a good one. We really like Miles the Brave at our house, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to get into some of your kid podcast recommendations. What is the first kid podcast you have for us today?
Pixel Quest.
What is Pixel Quest about?
It has this guy that is only on level 1 and he's trying to get more stuff, and this guy named Glitch is a time twister and he wants to take over the world.
Yikes, that sounds a little scary.
I know.
Why do you like Pixel Quest?
'Cause it has funny parts about Pork. He's like a fairy and he got trapped in one of Glitch's crystals.
And is Pork's funny? He's a funny character?
Yeah.
Okay. And what is your next kid podcast for us for today?
Snoopy and Sniffy.
You do love Snoop and Sniffy. Okay. And tell me, what is Snoop and Sniffy about?
There's this character that has its name is Snoop, and he's a dog that talks. The schlubs are humans and they can't understand him, and he can go up on cases
And does Snoop have a partner that he works with?
Yes, it's Sniffy. He's like the same but more like chunkier and funner. He gets lots of sleep but tells Snoop I'm not wanting to sleep, but in the morning Snoop finds Sniffy sleeping. You want to hear about the scary gnomes?
I would love to hear about the scary gnomes.
There's like a gnome, and it's still on Snoop and Sniffy, and they solve the case. You want me to tell you the story?
Sure, tell me the story.
So first Freckles is like another dog that works at fire station, and that's a firefighter, and she has a partner named Iggy that is not a firefighter yet, but getting there.
And what happened with the gnomes?
Well, they couldn't talk, so that's all I'm going to tell you today.
Do we have to listen to the episode to find out what happens?
We already listened to it, Mom.
What about all of the listeners that are listening to this episode? Do they need to listen to the Snoop and Sniffy episode about the gnomes?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a favorite Snoop and Sniffy episode other than the gnome episode?
Nope.
The gnome one is your favorite?
Yep.
Okay. What is your last kid podcast for us today?
Story Train.
And tell me about Story Train. What is Story Train?
It's a place when you go in the train and it has a story. That's why it's called Story Train.
Okay. And when do you usually listen to Story Train?
Night.
Nighttime? Like bedtime?
Yes.
What is your favorite Story Train episode?
Rainbow Horse. And
why is it your favorite?
'Cause I don't remember what. There's a horse and it's rainbow. Oh, and I like the color of rainbow.
There you go. Rainbow is a beautiful color. Do you have any advice for parents who want their kids to listen to kid podcasts?
Yep. Just check on .com plus story button and maybe you'll just get an answer from Mr. Jim.
We really like Mr. Jim, huh? He makes some great podcasts.
The best! Here's a puzzle one. I might do it on a different one, so on a different podcast one, but we're going to be okay for now.
You like the Puzzleables podcast too, huh?
Mm-hmm. You get a little black bag with the little mystery animal. And you get to open it up at the end of the podcast, and then you'll find the answer.
That sounds fun. We'll have to do some more of those, huh?
Yep, always.
Thanks for being on the show today, Clara.
Yep, always be podcasting.
Isn't Clara's energy contagious? She is so much fun. I've got a little bit more information about Clara's 3 kid podcast recommendations to help you further decide on if they will be a good fit for your kiddos. Pixel Quest is the first one she talked about. It takes place in a video game, and there is a fun and hilarious cast of characters that you will fall in love with. Next was Snoop and Sniffy, which is like Sherlock Holmes and Watson, but in dog form. They solve a case during each episode and get into shenanigans along the way. And the last one is Story Train. This podcast is a great one for bedtime. Each episode is a sweet story that can help your littles calm down for bed. This is actually the last episode I'll be releasing for a little while. I'm taking the summer off to relax and rejuvenate and get ready for the fall. I hope you have a delightful summer, and if you're needing a dose of the Friendly Podcast Guide during this break, I have more than 100 episodes for you to go back and listen to. And you'll catch me sometimes on Instagram over the summer. Talk to you soon. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Yep. It is. If you don't know Mr. Jim's name, just head over and send a mail to him and say, what is your name? But I could just tell you right now, it's Mr. Jim.